certain provisions of the open meeting law and imposing strict limitation on the number of people they may gather in one place. This meeting of the Berkshire Hills Regional School District School Committee will be conducted both in person and virtual. In-person attendance will be limited to school committee members, the superintendent and business administrator. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted at this time. However, the meeting may be accessed remotely through Zoom and or Facebook. Agenda items are those reasonably anticipated by the chair, and not all items listed may in fact be discussed. Those items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. This meeting is being recorded by CTSB and will be broadcast. The meeting is also being recorded by the committee recorder, other members of the committee, members of the audience, and press. Minutes will be transcribed and made public and posted to our Facebook page once approved, posted to our website once approved, excuse me. I'm going to take a roll call so I know who's here. Sean Stephen?
Yes.
Jason St. Peter?
Yes.
Bill Fields?
Here.
Molly Thomas?
Here.
Lori Sprague? Ann Hutchinson? You just see if she's, that's not everyone, that's the problem. I don't hear Ann, so, and Bonnie is not here. Diane? And Rich is not here yet, he is running late.
That might be Diane who just called in.
Okay.
We have a quorum.
Yes, we do have a quorum. Let's start right out with the superintendent's report.
Okay, so the thing I'm most excited to talk about in terms of good news is that kids are back in school in a variety of different ways. We had hoped to start Monday a week ago, and we had two pretty nasty snowstorms. So for 2 days in a row, we worked remotely. And then Wednesday's our Wednesday day, and we brought kids in on Thursday. So we've had kids in Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, and then again today, Thursday. The whole elementary school is in now 4 days a week, with the exception of a small number of peer partners in the pre-K program who get to come in 2 days a week. And that's really going wonderfully, and I'm very excited about it. And then the middle and high school have most kids coming in 2 days a week. Though there's a small number of cohort A kids who are coming in 4 days a week, and I think that's off to a nice start. There's several things, and I'll talk more about this in the COVID part of the thing. But we look at county-wide numbers, we look at town numbers, we look at cases within the school, and then we also juggle staffing issues. And we're doing well, but we're very much operating with skeleton staffing right now. And at any point, if too many people, additional people are out, that could jeopardize what we're doing. But so far it's been really good. And I'd just like to thank the principals and the teachers on that. And the staff, all the staff for their work. So that's going really well. The other thing I'd like to mention, and I think some community people are involved in this too, we've been running a clinic, or hosting a clinic. We're not really running it. We're hosting a clinic for COVID vaccines at the Du Bois Middle School, and that's going really well. It's on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and I think they serve between 600 and maybe 900 people on a day. So that's remarkable, and we're really happy to host them, and glad that's going so well. So that's some of the good news. The next thing is a procedural thing. Every year I ask you to vote to accept school choice students, and some districts do it differently than us. From a state perspective, you're not obligated to vote. Taking no action would mean that we would accept school choice students, but I think it's a good practice to vote to do it. As I've explained, seems like 1,000 times, This district doesn't vote grade by grade on how many seats there are. You all give me some latitude there. We accept choice applications. We do a lottery. We put kids in order based on that lottery. And then we fill seats deliberately where we see there being room. Even as we recover from COVID and move forward, I think we're going to be a little cautious about keeping class sizes smaller than historically we have. So we'll be very deliberate there, but I would like to ask for your support to vote to accept school choice students for fiscal year 22.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion. I have a motion by Jason, a second by Corey, was the first one I heard. Any discussion from the school committee? Or any members of the public for that matter? Hearing none, all votes in virtual meetings are in roll call. Sean Stephen?
Yes.
Jason St. Peter?
Aye.
Phil Fields?
Yes.
Molly Thomas?
Yes.
Corey Sprague?
Yes.
Ann Hutchinson?
Yes.
Diane Singer?
Yes.
I don't think Rich Tahoney has joined us, but I'll just check. He is not, and I'll vote yes, so it is a unanimous vote.
Great, thank you. So the next thing that we're going to do is do our budget presentation. And Sharon and I will do that together. I'll start by sharing a little context, and then Sharon will go into some of the fine details. Are you able to project it?
I don't think so because I'm not.
Okay, so just give me a sec. Sorry. Christine, can you include Sharon as a host?
Hold on 1 second, I'm trying.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And if you can't, I'll log in.
I'm working on it now.
It doesn't look like I can. Whoever initiated the meeting, I think, has to do it.
Is there someone from CTSB who's on who could make Sharon Harrison the co-host?
Do you want me to send it to you? Do you send it?
Yes, there's two.
Yes. Who should be the co-host?
Sharon Harrison. I assume that's it. You're not under Berkshire Hills, you're under Sharon, right?
What?
You're under Sharon, not Berkshire Hills, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
You entered the meeting.
Okay, all set.
Appreciate it.
Okay, do you say it, Sharon?
So, first I'm gonna bring it up.
Okay, so we'll get to it in 1 second. Great. So every year when we present the budget, we start with the mission, and I'll read it because I think it's important, and then say a couple things about it. So our mission is to ensure all students are challenged through a wide range of experiences to become engaged, curious learners, and problem solvers who effectively communicate, respect diversity, and improve themselves and their community. And I like our mission. It always has some room for improvement, and we may revisit and tweak it at some point, but that's what it is. When we were preparing the presentation, Sharon and I also talked about maybe getting a red crayon and crossing out our mission, because this year is really about supporting students and families and trying to get through a very difficult year. But it ends up our missions, both of those things, to support students and families, and to do these loftier things. And I think in different ways, in each of our buildings and in every classroom, we are doing that. As we look forward and sort of think of recovery and moving past COVID-19, here are some of our budget priorities. To reintegrate students into full-time face-to-face learning with a wide range of socio-emotional supports. We have a lot of work to do there, and in some ways, the elementary school kids are advantaged because they've spent much more time day after day in school than some of the older kids. But regardless, we have work to do there. There are all sorts of potential impacts from the pandemic that we need to work on. Issues connected to isolation, mental health, issues connected to disconnection and reintegrating in a broader social sense. And then I'm going to say this very carefully, issues connected to learning. Some folks are talking a lot about learning loss, and in some cases that's the case, but we've always prided ourselves on meeting young people where they are. So I'd like to focus less on learning loss and more on moving forward. We'll talk a little bit later on about sort of a range of opportunities and programs that we're starting to plan to support kids going forward. And then another thing that we've been working on for several years, and it reflects a broader national conversation, is ensuring equitable access for all students. And that means different things to different people in different contexts. As we get to the other considerations, there are two big things that are going on. We're in ongoing regionalization discussions with the Southern Berkshire Regional School District. There's a regional school district planning board. Several school committee members are on it. I'm on it. 24 in total community members are on it. And then that group is broken up into 4 additional groups that seem to meet pretty much constantly. So lots of work going on there. We were successful in raising some grant money. We asked the school districts to chip in a little more. We since have asked each of the 8-member towns to hold a space in their budgets to support even more. We're waiting and we'll likely hear from the state this week about a large grant we submitted. So again, lots of work there. The other thing is we have an ongoing collaboration with Richmond for shared services. We've committed to do that for at least 3 additional years. We also crafted, and I'll get to this in a later part in the presentation, to a 5-year tuition agreement with a 4% increase each of those 5 years. So that's significant work. Now we get to the proposed budget, and we'll start with budget changes. What we're presenting is very much a lean budget. As we get to things, I'll talk about a few shifts, but again, it's very lean. At the elementary school, Tim and his team have done a lot of work on what reopening will look like, and there are 2 potential, probably an infinite number of plans based on existing pandemic conditions. One of the things they learned was smaller classes were really a vehicle for connection and student success. So using the same resources, they've moved some people around to break kids up into smaller groups, to provide smaller, more supportive settings, and that's been really quite wonderful. It will also look at where we land with enrollment going forward. The middle school doing similar work, really focused around 4 core teams and specials. And the fifth and sixth grade are fairly straightforward in their approach. The seventh and eighth grade teachers work for 2 years with a group of kids, and they work across 2 grade levels, so there are lots of opportunities for them to plan together, and that, I think, is starting to really yield some wonderful results. At the high school, similar planning work. The high school, I think most of you know, has received a big Mass Ideas grant. The previous year was the planning year. Now we're more into implementation, all sorts of work on scheduling, classes, advisory, what ninth grade looks, career pathways, a host of really neat possibilities. So that's going on. Our intention is to maintain the CTE position, the Career and Technical Education position, and continue to work on academic redesign. Couple other things. The Berkshire County retirement system. So our teachers are covered by the teachers retirement system, many, and our administrators, but many of our other employees are covered by the Berkshire County retirement system. So the actual invoice amount to fully fund the system. Our workers' comp is a 4.58% increase. So it's 21, fiscal year 21 plus 10%. And then our other insurances are at a 0% increase. So that's good. Health and dental insurance, no increase in either of them for the upcoming year. That's wonderful. And Medic's rate changes in January of each year. Obviously, we spend or invest a lot in transportation. That is tied to the CPI increase of 1.7%. And special education is that as well. And then technology, we obviously are investing more than ever in software and hardware. As we look at supplies, texts, and materials, we're in the process of evaluating a range of different math curricula, pre-K to 12, and we'll share some thoughts on that as we get a little farther into it. But we're looking to shift our materials there. And then in other lines, we made decreases where we could. On the capital side, we're repaying the short-term borrowing for one of the chiller units and repairs at the elementary school. And we're still holding some funds for the high school restructuring of common spaces to provide additional shared learning space. Sometimes that line is also referred to as the locker line. I like the way it's phrased here better. So as we go by department, we look at how benefits are allocated proportionally and the full cost of schools, including facilities and grounds. So you'll see where the bulk of our money is going on this page, and then we'll get into more in a second. The elementary school is 19.09%, the middle is 18.01%, and the high school is 26.2%. Student services and services for English language learners are 10.03% for a grand total of 73.33%. As we go to the next page, district-wide and all other, which includes non-public transportation and contingency, is 13.78%. School committee and administration is 7.56%. And that includes the superintendent, the business administrator, the business office, the Director of Learning and Teaching, the technology staff and district-wide technology expenses, district-wide medical expenses, transportation for the regular day, and food service in our operating budget. Okay. And I think now this is, Sharon, this is where I hand it over to you.
Sure, you can keep going, doing a good job.
Okay. Let me hand it over to Sharon because she's really good at explaining this pie chart, which is just a expanded representation of what we were talking about. I think the big thing to remember here is that the bulk of our budget, like any human service organization, school district, is tied up in or invested in salary and benefits. So Sharon.
Okay. Peter covered a lot of this. This is another way, when Peter talked about the previous two slides on how it's allocated across department, the funds are allocated across department, this is another way to look at it throughout the entire district. So through the entire district, salary and benefits are almost 77%, right? Teaching, education is a service industry, and that is where your costs are. Then the next largest cost is transportation, followed by educational services. And that includes anything from tutoring to out-of-district tuition. Then each line gets smaller after that. Utilities is the next largest, and then facilities and operations. Facility and operations is everything building related that's not utilities. So maintenance, equipment maintenance, grounds, all of that. Educational supplies and materials, equipment is 1.86. Then we start getting smaller at other administrative costs, which is general insurance, liability insurances. Technology is the next largest, and then we start getting smaller with professional development and activities, athletics, and field trips. So it's just two different ways to look at how the money gets spent. This next slide shows what our budget is, the proposed budget is going into FY22. So gross budget of $30,284,460, or an increase of $936,399, 3.19% increase. The net operating budget, and the way we get to the net from the gross, is we subtract our projection for income for school choice as well as tuition in. We have tuition agreements with Farmington River Regional School District and Richmond. After we subtract the revenue from those two sources, the net operating budget is $28,304,460, or $956,399. And we had a drop in the revenue from tuition in because of the number of students enrolled in our sending districts. That's why you see the difference. It's not exactly a $2 million drop because of that. So that's the net operating budget goes to 3.5. So I talked about the difference between the gross and net, and both the choice and tuition are based on current projections. So the students that we have here already, who will be graduating from our sending districts, and then an average of the choice students that we typically take in each of the grades, if there are seats available, so we've changed that. Capital budget is the second piece, and we have a number of things in there. As usual, we have the repayment on the elementary and middle school construction bonds. After FY22, there's only 2 more years left, which is good news. The additional that's built into this is repayment of short-term borrowing for the chiller, that repair that Peter talked about, and then the high school common spaces as well. We added the high school common spaces in here based on a request from the Buildings and Grounds Committee. The school committee itself needs to discuss that, but we're going to talk a little bit about funding for it, which, whether it's in or comes out, won't impact the bottom line on the net assessment. Let's talk a little bit about revenue. Chapter 70 is about $900 lower than what was in the budget last year. For those of you that followed the news from the state and know that the state budget didn't get passed for FY21, the year we're in now, until late in the year, almost December, and our Chapter 70 was down about 30,000 from our projection. This Chapter 70 now is almost level to what we had projected last year. Chapter 71 is down about $50,000 to $800,000. Part of that is because this year we went from 180 school days to 170, so we had 10 less days. Plus we have remote days that we're not paying 100% on that expense. So as our expenses go down, our potential for reimbursement from the state goes down. And we don't know what the percentage will be in that. School choice is at $1,275,000. It's up just slightly. Again, that's just based on the projection. We're projecting an additional $25,000 from that. Tuition is down $45,000 to $705,000. Again, based on enrollment projections. The MSBA amount, $1,120,934. That is a contracted rate from the state, so we'll get that in FY22, as well as 23 and 24 until the school bonds are paid off. Medicaid, interest income, miscellaneous income is down slightly. The miscellaneous is down a little bit. Excess and deficiency, in this proposed budget, we have $350,000 used to reduce the cost for the operating budget. And we have $160,000 used from E&D for the additional capital expenses. $80,000 to pay off the borrowing and $80,000 for the high school work. Again, the high school work still needs to be discussed by the school committee. Should they decide not to put it in, we would go from $160,000 used in excess deficiency down to $80,000 just to pay off the chiller. And this amount represents 48% of the E&D balance that we now have. Just like with expenses, we look at where the money comes from revenue sources, and it's primarily an assessment, 77%. The state funding, each year we get about $30 additional per student. So we will see that this percentage will be about the same going forward. In the assessments, there are three considerations. The population allocation of our resident students between the three towns, the minimum local contribution, which is a requirement from the state as the lowest that a community can invest in or has to invest in education, and then the net assessment. Net assessment is the net budget less all of the revenue sources we just talked about. So first is the population allocation. You see that Great Barrington went up slightly from 74.2187% to 74.5704. And Stockbridge also went up slightly, 12.3884 to 12.7148. And West Stockbridge went down 13.329 to 12.7148. And yes, that is correct, that Stockbridge and West Stockbridge this year have the same number of students. So they have the same percentage allocation. The minimum local, as I said, it's the amount the state says that's the minimum a community needs to spend on education. So the minimum local contribution went up for Great Barrington from $7,264,000 to $901. That was the budgeted amount. It changed a little after the final state budget came out to $7,300,930. Stockbridge also went up slightly, $1,220,907 to $1,260,218. And West Stockbridge went down about 160,000 from $1,402,529 to $1,260,218. That gets all of those two then get combined, and we look at what's left in the budget to be paid after the minimum local contribution is taken out. And Great Barrington increases from $17,567,330 to $18,432,734. Stockbridge, again, you saw that their enrollment went up as well as the minimum local. So their net assessment went up from $2,940,563 to $3,158,272. And West Stockbridge went from $3,261,621 to $3,158,272. All of that goes down to the total change in assessment. That's the net budget, less Chapter 70, 71, all of those other sources that we discussed. And those have gone down a little. As I said, there are a couple of spots, particularly Chapter 71. Chapter 71 is the transportation reimbursement. So the total assessment increase at 4.12, or just under 1 million at 979,764. So then you see the cascading effect of the change in enrollment and the minimum local. Great Barrington increased 4.93%, or 865,404. Stockbridge increased 7.4%, or 217,709. And West Stockbridge decreased 3.17%, or 103,349.
Yeah, and I'll jump in and talk about the grants for a sec. So we've made a real commitment to working to win grants to support students, and in some cases staff growth as well, which ultimately supports students. This year we had a particularly good year. I mentioned before, but maybe not everybody's heard it. We received 2 Department of Justice grants, one around mental health and one around school safety, totaling $818,546. I mean, one, it's a huge amount of money, so that's great, and it's going to let us do good work. Probably as interestingly, only 4 of those grants were awarded in all of Massachusetts, and we got 2 of the 4. So that's unheard of, and particularly unheard of for a small rural community to get that level of support. Special education through IDEA is $437,000 and change. Our 21st Century Community Learning Center grant is $400,740. That's another very competitive grant, and that's letting us run extended day programs in the elementary, middle, and high school, and also some special summer programs. So we very much appreciate that support. Earlier, I mentioned the Mass Ideas grant. It's a little more than $200,000. Again, that was a very competitive grant through with support from the Bohr Foundation, Tides Foundation, and I believe Nellie May. Title I is a federal entitlement grant, $189,000. Our rural health grant, $85,000. This year, we very much appreciate the town of Great Barrington for investing some of their marijuana mitigation money into our new health and wellness position that the school committee approved recently, right? The next one is Berkshire United Way's support of Project Connection. That's $40,000. We really appreciate that. Title II is another federal entitlement grant. I'll keep talking and Sharon may get back up. So the Title II is $35,000 and change. A special ed early childhood grant, $14,000 and change. A Title IV grant, $12,000 and change. Berkshire United Way to support work with greenagers, $12,500. A Perkins vocational grant for $14,000, and then the labor board grant for $3,000. We also have some other grants, and I'll go through them. So the Berkshire Taconic Fund for Excellence, which funds specific projects, is a $2,655 grant. The Bridging Divides grant is going to the Regional School District Planning Board, but we're the fiscal agent for it. That's another $2,500. We appreciate their support. And then some state and federal grants connected to COVID recovery, $220,000, $141,000, and $29,000. So our total grants to date are almost 10% of our budget, $2,741,913. And then there's one more slide because it never stops. We have two additional grants, or three really, to be awarded. The ESSER 2 is another federal recovery grant tied to COVID. That's $559,315. There's a state coronavirus prevention grant of $56,625, and a rural sparsity grant that could be in the maybe $40,000 to $60,000 range. That is in the budget, but we've not received the notification yet on the amount or the money. So that's a mouthful. I know we talked a lot and it's a ton for people to digest. There's tons of backup material that folks can respond to, and Sharon and I are happy to respond, Steve, as you see fit, to the school committee or maybe anybody else.
So if people have questions, just raise your hand, and I'll just go over while you're thinking about it, our schedule. So we have a meeting with the town's select boards and finance committees on Tuesday, February 23rd. And then Thursday, February 25th, we have a public hearing and a possible vote. And then if we do not vote on the 25th, on Wednesday, March 10th, we have a tentative meeting. If we don't vote on the 25th. And let's see who has their hand up, Peter. Does anybody have their hand up?
Okay, so, and what you can do in the reactions section on the Zoom, you can click and there's a little button that says raise your hand, so that's easy. If you want to just wave your hand, that works too. And Steve and I will call on you. I know somebody has a question. Teachers like to joke a little bit about wait time and giving people time to get ready. So I'll make that joke to kill some time. And again, this is a ton to digest, so you may not have questions now, but you may need to digest it and make sense of it and come back to us with questions.
I had one question.
Okay, yeah, Jason.
Just so we, it could be, because Stockbridge obviously is going up 7%, and we do this every year. They went down a lot. West Stockbridge went up a lot last year, but the minimum local contribution as to why that goes up. Could you just briefly touch on that? People that might not.
The minimum local contribution, the state puts together what it calls the foundation budget. And the state allocates costs across a foundation budget for various cost centers, for transportation, special education, pre-K students, students with disabilities, English language learners. They come up with the full budget. And then they look at that foundation budget and they are trying to get each district to be at 82.5%. So that the district is more responsible, 82.45% of that cost, and then the state puts in the 17.5. Then it looks at the relative wealth of a community. The relative wealth includes the equalized valuation of the housing stock, and it's equalized across the state, as well as income of the residents in each community. Once they look at that, they determine how much of that minimum local that needs to come out of the foundation budget for the community to pay, how much gets allocated to each community in a district. A municipality obviously is just one, but in each district, they allocate, and that's how they come up with the minimum local contribution based on the relative wealth of each community. And that's the minimum.
Great, thank you.
And one other thing that comes up, so some communities do like a 5-year rolling average to hedge against sort of increases in one year and decreases in another. A few years ago, we had, somebody was asking about this, and Sharon did a whole study of it, and we determined it didn't really make a lot of sense to do it, that I think only in 1 year it actually was impactful. Remember?
Yes, it pretty much, the average pretty much works out the same.
No. Other questions? Oh, somebody, Paul, good. Paul, go ahead and unmute yourself. You're good.
Paul Gibbons, Great Barrington. Just a quick question, and if you can't answer it tonight, that's fine. You could always send me the information. Can you tell me by how much your E&D account increased this year?
Yeah, I think Sharon can pull up a report and speak to that. Just a little context in it for people who don't know the language. E&D stands for excess and deficiency. It's like a town's free cash account. So it's our reserve that we can use to help reduce assessments or occasionally to fund discrete special projects. By state law, for regional school districts, it's capped at 5%, so it can never go higher than that. Last year, we actually returned money to I think it was last year, to the 3 towns, or 2 years ago, we returned money to the 3 towns because we exceeded that. And you'll see every year we chip away at it. When we have insurance payment holiday, like health insurance payment holiday, that money eventually drops down to E&D. And that's really the only way recently we've reimbursed it or we've built it. And some years we have a little money left over if it's a particularly warm winter. So Sharon can speak to it.
At the end of 2019, our E&D was 713,544, and we used the 352,000. And then at the end of 20, it was 1,068,436. And as Peter said, we had a premium holiday last year on the insurance. So that led to the larger increase as well as school closing. So our cost for transportation, field trips, and stipends, activity advisor stipends, was much lower than we anticipated because the schools were closed.
Did I answer, Paul?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So just to follow up on Paul, so what is the D&D if we take everything that's in the proposed budget today, what are we gonna have left? Do we know that?
I can tell you right now.
And while Sharon's looking that up, so if we were to do some sort of high school project, we might want to use some of the money in E&D to cover design costs, right? And then every year, you all vote to use some of E&D to reduce the assessments. So it's a fine line. Some people want to raid the E&D cookie jar, and I get why folks want to do that. And
He's looking at me.
I am looking at, you can't tell, but I'm looking at Rich, right? But in the off year, the year after you raid the E&D cookie jar, unless there's some unexpected windfall, then you really put yourselves into a pickle.
So after the use, if we use it for the capital and operating as is the proposed budget, it would be just over 556,000 remaining.
Great, thanks.
Okay. So any other questions?
Yes, Peter and Sharon, about transportation. And this has come up before, I believe. We didn't go to school as much last year. There were no athletic transportation, and I noticed that there's an increase. It's not a huge increase, it's 0.7. For people who are concerned about the cost of transportation, which the state still doesn't give us 100%, can you explain why it hasn't gone down more dramatically and where actually it has gone up, considering that we didn't run an athletic program, and the number of school days that the kids are being transported has decreased?
Yeah.
Because we are projecting that we will have a full school year next year, and each year the contract increases by the CPI. So I took this year's cost per bus, per run, increased it by the CPI, and projected a full school year next year. Same thing with the athletic line, that we are anticipating and very hopeful that we will have a full athletic schedule next year as well, and we will need to cover all of the transportation costs for away games.
And Bill, there's one other nuance thing, and this is more to this year. So this year, a normal year, there are 180 school days, and we run buses for 180 days. This year, there were 170 school days because of the 10 the commissioner gave us at the beginning. On the days that were fully remote days, those weeks at the beginning and then sort of at the end of December into January, we weren't running buses. So there's some savings there for not running buses, but we got to remember that the amount the state reimburses us is tied to the actual cost, right? So we're paying less for busing because we didn't use it for some weeks, but the state then is giving us even less reimbursement because we didn't pay for it.
Okay, yeah.
And then on top of that, the money that we save falls to E&D.
Yeah, or to the
Transportation revolving fund.
revolving.
Yeah.
But what do you think? That's really no different.
appropriated for transportation last year, assuming a regular year, didn't happen, some of that money is gonna fall to the fund. But next year, as Sharon said, we're assuming a full year and appropriating that. So the appropriations should be roughly the same.
Well, it's the same plus the CPI.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I see Heather's got one.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, very well.
Hear me now? Hi, thanks for taking my question. I feel like I should know this, but why is the district working with a skeleton crew right now? Is that because of people are on quarantine, or is it just all the the various difficult logistics regarding the lockdowns and the pandemic?
A whole host of things. So some folks are working remotely because they have medically documented reasons, right? They have compromised immune systems and their doctors saying they should work remotely. So that's one possibility. The other thing is everybody's doing a really good job of being conscientious about protecting everybody else's health. So in the past, if you had the sniffles or sore throat, you suck it up and come to work. And in this climate, we don't want anybody to suck it up and come to work. We want people who are potentially contagious to stay home and figure out what's going on. I think that's compounded a little bit with where just a few paraprofessionals resigned or retired. So we're a little short-staffed there. So all those things come together, and then there's the regular stuff too, right? So somebody has a closing to refinance their mortgage, somebody's kid is sick, all the other things that happen. But we've never had a ton of substitutes, and we need more substitutes now. You might have noticed I pasted that in the Great Barrington Community Board today, and also on my personal page. So if anybody wants to substitute, reach out to me or Doreen, my secretary, and we'll set you up to do that.
Thank you, Peter.
Anyone else? Okay, do you see any hands up?
I don't see any more hands up.
Okay, let's move ahead.
Okay, so thank you all. I know that's a lot to hear. So the last thing I wanted to do was just give, and it's an interesting thing, we're going into February break, so I'm not as fixated on the numbers as I normally am, but the numbers are really quite remarkable and some of the best we've seen since the pandemic started. The countywide infection rate is 0.66, which rivals what it was in the summer, and it's still trending down. And the countywide positive test rate is 1.6. Our own Great Barrington is down quite a bit, and it's at 2.59 for the positive test rate. Stockbridge is 0.26, and West Stockbridge is 0.62. So we're really in good shape, much better than after the winter break and much better than after Thanksgiving. And the other sort of hot spot was Halloween, right? Which there was quite a bit of spread connected to that. So I'm really psyched about the numbers, but I think it's really important for us not to rest on our laurels or get lazy about it, right? Let's keep the numbers low and let's not see them spike again. So mask or double mask, wash your hands, keep the social distancing. I think all the schools are demonstrating that they can be very safe because they follow very careful protocols. And particularly, I sent out a reminder about this, and I'll do it again over the break. Please be very deliberate about your choices over February break. We're all in this together. And if at the last minute somebody does buy you that ticket to Disney World, make sure on your return you get tested and quarantine and do all the things the governor's encouraging you to do. The one safe spot, and after my note on this, I got a lot of comments on it. Hawaii is the only low-risk state, so lots of people are using my leverage to encourage their spouses to take them to Hawaii for February. So if you do that, please give me credit for it. That, I think, is really the COVID-19 update. Again, I'll pause and respond to questions if people have questions there.
Are you anticipating a shift after February break if things continue on this path?
You mean in terms of more kids being in school?
Correct.
Yeah, potentially, right? So largely the whole elementary school is in right now, right? And we hope to continue that. We had plans for the 5th and 6th grade to be in 4 days a week, and we'd love to do that. The bump in the road is around staffing, and I'm going to work really hard to see if we can resolve that, and that would be the next step. As you know, I mean, better than any of us, we've had some success with boys and girls basketball, and I'm excited about that. We've had success with downhill skiing. There are plans underway for the Funny Fall 2 season to happen in the spring, which is football and soccer, and then plans for and maybe one other one that I'm forgetting. Maybe volleyball is also part of that. And then plans after that for baseball, track, and tennis. So I'm excited about that. We're talking about other activities, so it's more than just athletics, but it's artistic things, music, drama, the whole range. So hopefully we keep expanding. We are constrained at the high school by the 6-foot social distancing and the physical space, and we continue to explore a range of possibilities there.
I did notice that other districts are shifting from that 6 foot down to a lower, the original recommendation, 3 foot range. Is there, if the community numbers go to a point where they're almost negligible, is there any thought to shifting back to complete full-time, or is that off the table at this point?
No, I don't think anything's off the table. I think there have to be discussions about it, and that's something that there was new guidance today, and there's just constant guidance. I haven't had a chance to read it, but new guidance from the Commissioner's Office and the Department of Public Health around busing and constraints around busing.
No more limit, no more space limit.
Oh, okay. All right. So we'll look at that too. And I think there's wide agreement that when we can do in-person learning, it's preferable, and we hope we can continue to move to doing more of it. And at some point, it'll get warm again, and then that'll afford us a wider range of options too.
I mean, the good position here now is when we originally had these conversations in July and August, we had nothing to look at. And now there's just so many studies because, well, we took a very conservative approach. Other regions of the country didn't. And at the high school level, there just really is no, even in places with high rates, the amount of transmission within high schools is so low. I think that's why the state is pretty confident in reducing that number. And I know that was really what always hamstrung us is the square footage at the high school. But right. You look at it through the lens of the research that's out there now, I think we have some opportunities.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I was just going to ask about testing. I mean, that would be the other piece that would give us a level of confidence that we haven't had up until this point. So just an update on where we stand with that.
Yeah, so I'm meeting with some colleagues, superintendents tomorrow about this. And I can't remember what I told you last, but we're approved and trained and ready to do the Buy Next Now rapid test. And we're approved to participate in the pool testing by the state, and they've assigned us a vendor that's tied to the Broad Institute, which is great. We're working as a sort of consortium of districts to write a job description and hire some external people, maybe nurses, maybe some other background, to supervise those tests. For the older kids, it's largely self-administered. For the youngest kids, the person will probably support that happening. And the aspirational hope was for it to start after February break. Realistically, it might be a couple more weeks than the Monday after February break, because we've not even interviewed people to do it. But we're moving forward with it. We set aside the resources to cover the cost of it. We just have to connect with the test provider and tie up some loose ends around staffing and coverage. So I imagine the next time we talk, I can tell you that either we're doing it or we're about to do it pending the hire. Any other questions?
Peter, my favorite subject, MCAS. Is there any word from the state that you know of or other superintendents in regards to this idiotic plan that was announced earlier where they're going to have MCAS and they're still debating about whether or not students are going to be brought in for this or they're going to do it remotely with all the problems that ensues? And did you hear anything from the state in regards to our wonderful letter that we all unanimously agreed to send, talking about the testing situation and what it does to our district?
Funny you should ask, Bill. Today I was on a call with the commissioner and several people brought this up. So many districts have similar concerns to the concerns we have. The plan as it stands now is for districts to go ahead and do it. And I think I shared that they've taken all the accountability implications away from it, but it's still not a great plan. They're waiting for additional feedback or direction from the new Secretary of Education and his department around what's going to happen and if there'll be any increased flexibility. I hope that comes and that we sort of have an 11th hour reprieve to change things. I agree with the letter that you unanimously approved, and I'll reach out and follow up about their response to our letter. It may be one of hundreds of letters they've gotten and they've not had a chance to respond yet. But it doesn't make a lot of sense, and I'd rather use our time and energy and resources on anything else, right? Supporting kids, families, food insecurity, learning opportunities, anything than that.
Well, they're hep on this and they're wanting to do this test for some reason. Because they're using the rationale that we have to determine and measure this new concept called learning loss, which is itself really questionable, that it would give, hopefully, if you talk to people in the Department of Education and DESE, it would possibly be to give the districts the local option of whether or not we want to opt out or not. And allowing districts that want to continue this craziness, they can go ahead and test. But other districts may want to have the flexibility where we're not put into a straitjacket and forced to do this.
No, very much so. Well, one other thing, and Bill, you'll find this interesting. This morning I was on a different call with folks from DESE, and they are piloting a new, really innovative science MCAS. So there's the regular part, and then there's a new part that's really hands-on, applied learning, reasoning, problem solving, sort of all the wonderful things we'd like to see in a thoughtful assessment. And it'll be interesting to see how that work grows over time. So as I get more information on that, I'll bring it back to the group and share that.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? See anything, hands?
Nobody on page 1, and nobody to my knowledge on page 2.
So let's move ahead.
Okay.
Um,
So that's it for me. I think now we go to subcommittee reports.
Thank you. Policy Subcommittee has not met. Buildings and Grounds?
Yes, we did meet last week, February 3rd. Had a productive meeting as usual. First bullet was Steve Soul gave an update on the district buildings and grounds. He explained to us that he took a deep dive into the heating systems, especially at the high school, because that's been notorious for having problems over the years. And the same problems in the past have existed. Some areas were good, some were warm, some were cool. None of them were particularly cold, which was good. But he is making headway as best he can, looking at the different duct systems, et cetera, doing the best he can with an aged building and aged heating system. The other thing he did at the high school was took some more time exploring outdoor classrooms. That actually came up even before the COVID crisis, just as another way of learning. So, and that's going full bore. He's thinking about between the F and D wings. He's working with teachers in the school on that. Let's see. Another third thing was obviously with the COVID crisis and the 6-foot space problem. A lot of stuff had to get moved around. A lot of that stuff was moved into the gym because of lack of space. But now, fortunately, thankfully, that basketball has started and the fall 2 sports will start after that. And then spring sports, we're using that space. He's had to shift a lot of that to other parts of the buildings, to the auditorium, et cetera. For those of us who have watched the basketball games, obviously there's still stuff being stored in there. So he is continuing to make a concerted effort to try to clear that space out even more. But he's quickly running out of room. But hopefully he can make it more so that the gym can be more usable as the time goes on. This again was last week, but he said all 3 schools were looking good as far as the kids coming back after a couple-month break. Middle school heating system, the geothermal system we have there, there's a valve that needs to be rebuilt every 3 or 4 years. That's just a normal life expectancy. That'll be about $1,000, and that's going to be done. The other thing at the middle school with the cold weather that we had a few weeks ago, sprinkler head froze and then blew at the main entrance. It was that little alcove, so it actually wasn't part of the building. It was that detached alcove, which obviously is more at risk for freezing. But fortunately, it happened right in the morning at 8 something, and everyone was there, so no significant damage occurred. But again, that's something this summer when he has more time, he'll look for a more permanent fix. Get the fire chief involved to make sure it's mowing the sprinkler system. So obviously everything has to be on the up and up there. So avoided any other major freezing problems with that cold weather we had. Also at the middle school, as mentioned earlier, the COVID clinics have been going well regarding the community. They're basically been happening every Wednesday and Saturday, and they were going to continue to go on. So good community use for the school, and one of the advantages of having Wednesdays off is the community can use that for the clinics. Going forward, if the need arises, there actually might be some Sunday usage as well, depending on how the clinics go. So that's being used well in the off time. Elementary school, the chiller, as the funds that we discussed earlier, he's hoping that will be fixed over the April break. That's what it's scheduled for. Let's see. The next thing is, as far as the maintenance go this time of year, easy to overlook, but the snow removal and the plowing that our crew does, once again, exemplary job by those guys, and we don't want to be remiss in acknowledging that. At last week's meeting, there was no word yet on the MSBA funds. I'm not sure if anything's changed since then, but basically the COVID crisis has disrupted their meeting schedule and their timeline, and they're kind of there is no set in stone timeline at this point. Whenever they decide to allocate the money, decide is when we'll hear, but there's nothing definitive as far as we know. Peter, I don't know if you have anything to add, but.
No, that's really good. Thank you.
Okay, and then, let's see. The second main topic, it was just the high school extraordinary, funding stuff. Steve went back, and I know when Rich, Badway was, head of the building and grounds, 7 years ago, there was a spreadsheet that developed, that went through for 7 years, and he actually went through it with us through fiscal year 21, and surprisingly, there was quite a lot done, actually more done on that than not. And most everything was accomplished except for the big ticket items, that would obviously conflict with a potential building project and, the roof, asbestos abatement, all the 7-figure stuff that, was pie in the sky. So, but a lot of that, looking back, actually was done, which was, kudos to him and in the district for getting that done. And that was about it.
Any questions on buildings and grounds? Superintendent's evaluation, Ann?
It's not that.
I think we have a date, though.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
Finance, technology has not met. Finance subcommittee.
We met last week and really just reviewed and went over everything that was presented by the administration today. So I don't know if I need to report any facts from that meeting.
No.
Although we were very pleased with the way the budget was put together. Typically we'd be scheduling a finance meeting to kind of work on reactions or potential changes to the budget after put to the full committee. At this point, I don't feel like we need that, but if the committee as a whole, comes together and says we need to make changes to this budget, we can certainly quickly reconvene a finance committee meeting. I don't know, Steve or Bill, or Bonnie, if you guys agree with that, but.
Yeah, no, I do agree with it. There's no sense of meeting just for the sake of meeting.
That's what I was thinking, but if something comes up and we decide we need to make changes to the gross number or something like that, we can certainly get together and work on it.
I agree.
District Consolidation and Sharing Subcommittee, it's not formally meeting, but as Peter mentioned in his budget, the group that is meeting with Southern Berkshire has been meeting quite regularly, and it's a very slow process. It's going to take some time. There's a number of school committee members, select board members, and finance committee members from our 3 towns, and we are slowly plugging away at it. It's not surprising it's slow, but I think there is progress being made. Progress doesn't mean positive or negative, it just means we're diving into the details.
No, that's fair.
So we don't have anything in our budget for next year for that. Not that, we need to. I know we appropriated some money out of this year's budget.
We appropriated some out of this year's budget. We did not put a discrete line in it going forward. We're hopeful. We applied to the state, to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed for a $125,000 grant for this year. If those grants are available next year, we'll apply again. And I imagine they might be. And then there's some private philanthropies who might support it. And then there's a separate, I forget what it's called, but a set of budget or grant opportunities connected to like regional efforts that is more like in the town government side of things.
Yeah, you said that, so that, which is, I think is fine, the towns are chipping in money?
Well, what Lucy, the chair of the group, and Peter Taylor have been going from town to town, asking them to set aside, I think the number was $15,000 each, knowing that if we receive state money, that number might be reduced. So there'd be some support there. And then there's another way to get money from the state, not through the Department of Education, but through the Department of Revenue directly, to support regional efficiency projects.
Peter?
Yep.
Yes. You're muted, Sean.
Yeah, I just unmuted myself. I being on this board, I would recommend that we at least put some money off to the side, to acknowledge that this is something that needs to be paid for by the school districts. That's one of the issues we've been running into is school districts not wanting to pony up to pay for these sorts of things. So I think we need to put something in there.
Yeah. There's been no discrete or any kind of request because they're quite confident we're going to get state money. To put money aside now would just inflate the budget when there's been no request. I think if they do request money during the year, we can do like we did this year and transfer from line items that are underspent.
I think we could do that. I also think if all the towns were to contribute at the $15,000 ask, that would generate $120,000, which is a good, really significant amount of money, right?
And there's no difference between it coming from us. I mean, we get our money from the towns, so it either comes directly from the towns or from the towns to us to them. So it's not
We had a hard time getting people to pay, $2,500.
Not from us. Not from us. Not from us. We were fine. We approved it.
I understand that, but I want to make sure that they know that we're ready to do this.
And we are. I agree with you, and we are.
Yeah, no, I think it's a point well made, and maybe what I do is Lucy with that as an agenda item for a future meeting before the school districts finish up their budgets for this year.
They do not want to put that into their budgets.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Anyone else?
Steve and or Peter, does this group plan on doing some sort of progress report to make it public? Some people have asked me about what's going on with it, and it seems to be that what is going on with it, and you've said, and I think I'm aware of some of the issues that are involved, but I'm not sure the general public is aware, especially one columnist who continually writes about why isn't this being done immediately. But I'm wondering if there's going to be, at some point, a progress report on what are all these meetings accomplishing.
So Bill, Lucy and Peter Taylor have met with every select board, and that's been covered by the press. And we have just formed a community outreach committee, or in the process of doing that, so there'll be even more contact with the community. So the progress that we made, although not insignificant, isn't worth a press release right now, but we are starting to get momentum.
Right, and Bill, just to add a little more detail, and I don't want to foreshadow too much of what's going on, but there have been discussions around sort of work has been done with select boards and finance committees, but it's obvious that there needs to be opportunities for dialogue with citizens, right, residents of all the towns. So I think there'll be some sort of presentations, listening sessions, survey, focus group things happening in the next 6 months. And in this context, a lot of that may end up happening by Zoom or something like that. And I think there's also some interest in some student leaders playing a role in helping convene and run some of those. So we'll share an update. Each of the districts is sort of hosting a temporary website for the group, but the communications group has aspirations of pretty quickly developing its own interactive website. There are more reports than you could possibly read that have been commissioned and done, and a lot of them are really pretty insightful. So you can find those on our website or Southern Berkshire's website, but eventually it'll be on a discrete website, and we can start pointing people to that. But as good as reports are, not everybody's got the stomach for reading them. And a couple of maybe a dozen hour-long informational sessions to give people a high-level overview of what's going on would be really relevant and will happen soon.
Yeah, and you're right, and you know the expression, it's not rocket science, this may be, because it's more complicated than people would think. Merging two regional districts is.
It's way more complicated than you ever dreamt about.
Yeah, so we're moving, we're meeting, and that's important.
Okay. Thank you.
Personnel report, Peter?
Yeah, so I just want to flag one thing on the personnel report. I think last week or 2 weeks ago, I shared with you all about Tim Lee's official news that he's retiring and how much I've appreciated Tim's time in the district. That position is posted with a closing date a month from today of March 11th. So we're starting to get applications for that. Another very thoughtful administrator in that building at Muddy Brook is Nan Thompson, and she's been with us for a number of years after a great career in Weston and starting in Maine. And Nan has also indicated that she will retire in this summer, in August. So what that means is 2 significant leadership changes in 1 year. And that's something that we can work through. What we're going to do is I'll send an email to parents. I've already reached out to staff about this, and obviously school committee members can join as well. But we're starting a search committee for the principal position. And we'll do that starting to meet sometime after March 11th. Slightly before, maybe March 1st, I'll also post the assistant principal position, and we'll get applications coming in as we finish up the principal search. And then one of the first duties of the new principal will be to be involved in the assistant principal search. So we'll try to condense the overlap of those two. So whoever our new principal is can play a role in that. In both cases, and I said this before, I really appreciate Tim. I also really appreciate Nan and all the things she's done for the district in a whole host of different ways. So challenging to lose 2 people in 1 year, but that's happened in other schools and people have managed the transition well. And we've got great teachers and staff there, and I'm sure we will do that.
The search committee's formed for both of those. Be given a copy of our new diversity hiring policy.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, that's like number 1, first document they'll get, and obviously we're doing things to try to draw a diverse candidate pool.
Any old or new business before the committee?
I just had one follow-up, an issue that came up today with the staffing issues regarding substitutes and the paras. Yeah, I know that because of union concerns, salary that with paras is, our hands might be tied, but with regard to substitutes, I know we increased our fees last year to be a lot more competitive, but I think, with extraordinary times calls for extraordinary actions, and if we need to increase those fees again to get people in the building, I think it's critical. So I for one, and if anything that is needed going forward to try to get as many people in the buildings as substitutes, qualified people, I am all for. I know with the COVID, a lot of the substitutes were older or retired teachers, and obviously they're at higher risk. So hopefully going forward, that won't be a problem. But again, if whatever we need to do as far as a board, I'm all for.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's my understanding, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that I actually have the latitude to adjust that rate. The substitutes aren't in a bargaining group. Obviously, I consult with the board, and I'm looking at a range of different models to do it. I think a temporary increase in the context of COVID makes sense, and hopefully there are people out there in the listening audience who are hearing this. We'll come up with a new rate structure and reach out to us. We really could use your help. The other thing is, we may be getting to the point where some of the more senior people who used to substitute are now getting their second vaccine and may feel more comfortable being back in school. So we'd welcome those people if they feel safe and protected to come back.
Great, thanks.
I don't want to speak for everybody else, but if you feel the need to make if you think there's a rate change and you need to make it unilaterally, you need to report back to us afterwards.
Yeah.
So that we're not-
No, that's, and I very rarely do that, but
Yeah.
this is the kind of situation
Yeah.
that warrants it. I started, and I didn't get to talk to Sharon, I was talking to Doreen, I started looking at different models. I think one of the things we could do is we have a different rate for day-to-day subs versus long-term subs, and paying people the higher long-term rate might be good. There might also be a way to incentivize people who work more days, right? So if you put in 4 days, you get X. If you put in 8 days, you get X plus Y. If you put in 12 days, you get X plus Y plus Z. So we have that flexibility. And even if they just
I mean, we're in a challenging labor market. If you need to make the commitment to people as long-term subs, and there's a couple days you don't really use them, I'd rather have that than to not be having kids coming to school because there's days we're short because we don't have people lined up. You know, I'd rather overstaff.
Right, no, and pretty much if somebody wanted to work from March till June, I could totally do that,
Yeah.
right? And another group that may be interesting, if people are listening and you have college students at home that have some free time, they could very easily substitute. Recent graduates, we put to work the whole thing, and it's not so awkward like teaching next to your favorite high school teacher, right? It's a good thing. So we'd really welcome you doing that.
It's like being on the school committee with your favorite high school teacher.
Any public comment? I was gonna say John Biacco isn't here, but
He might be listening though. Or we'll get a letter to the editor from that.
Any public comment? Anything you see, Peter?
Nobody on page 1, nobody on page 2. So just a closing thing, again, I'd really like to thank the staff, the teachers, paras, and other folks who are doing really remarkable work in trying times, and the students who are continually wonderful, and the parents who are endlessly patient. I'm hoping for no more snow days or storms during school time, though we might get a nice one during this break. And we're doing everything in our ability to keep the kids we have in school and to try to figure out other ways to get more kids in school.
Excellent. And by unanimous consent, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to sign us off.